Okay, Jessica, who's up next?
Well, Paul, our next question actually was posted on our website, trnn.com. Harriet writes, AIPAC has tremendous influence in the USA, but I read that their views do not reflect the majority of the Jews in America or the Jews in Israel. If this is so, why does AIPAC have so much power, and are there any polls addressing this question of popular opinion?
Yeah, we have a story which we're going to be running in the next few days of some polling. And the polling generally is what I was just saying previously, that the majority of ordinary Jews, first of all, don't swing their vote just based on Israel. There is a certain threshold, to be honest. I mean, if a candidate was like, quote unquote, anti-Israel, there probably would be some impact on the Jewish vote. But most Jews don't base their vote on that. And the current propaganda, for example, that Obama's weak on Israel and all of this, has not had impact, for example, on polling in Florida. But the main issue is what I said previously, is that the influence of AIPAC is that there's so much money there, in both parties. It doesn't take too many billionaires to have enormous influence. One can see now in the Republican primaries. You know, it's like, what is it, 6, 7, 8 billionaires funding most of the Republican primaries. And it's driving a whole set of politics. And the media reports on this theater as if it really matters. And so imagine that, but even a bigger group of billionaires having such influence in both parties. And big money talks. And plus, the state of Israel is quite organized. They have a very organized lobbying effort. I do want to just say one thing, though, because just in terms of my own personal opinion on this, I do not believe that the Israeli lobby is in control of U.S. foreign policy. It's very influential and it's very symbiotic. But I think the fundamental thing is U.S. strategy in the Middle East since World War II, first of all, was about Saudi Arabia, it was about Iran, it was about Turkey, and when the State of Israel came into being and clearly became so powerful militarily, it was also about Israel. These are pillars of U.S. hegemony in the Middle East, with Israel being one of the more important ones. And two, it's important to see that Israel more or less gets along with the other pillars. It certainly gets along fine with Saudi Arabia, in spite of whatever rhetoric there is. It gets along fine with some exception with Turkey. There's differences with Turkey over the flotilla, and Turkey's more critical. But Turkey's in NATO, and certainly no threat to Israel. Israel got along fine with Mubarak. Israel got along fine with the Shah of Iran. So this is a system. It's a jigsaw puzzle of interlocking states with their own interests. I don't think any of them are really puppets, but under the U.S. umbrella. So U.S. support for Israel is about the American elite's vision of their strategic interest in the Middle East, which of course in the final analysis is about oil, but not only oil. It's a massive market, and it's a massive player in terms of the geopolitics, rivalry with China, rivalry with Russia, and so on, and of course even India has interests there. So when we critique AIPAC, and when we critique the role of these billionaires that fund AIPAC and all the rest, it's not that they're not very influential. It's not that they don't have enormous influence in Congress. And that's where they really have their influence, probably more in Congress than they do on the professional diplomatic side or the professional military side. I mean, you can see in the leadership in the Pentagon right now, clearly generals making statements pushing back on Israeli pressure to launch a military assault on Iran, and we saw it under the Bush administration in the same way on the same issue. It's a complicated mixing up of interests, but the underlying interest here, the underlying most important foundation of it all, in spite of the influence of Israel and their allies here. And let me add to that, the Saudis have a ton of influence here as well that goes not spoken about very much, except we know how close the Bush family was to the Saudis. But it's true for all the American governments. Nobody pisses off the Saudis either. Given all of that, the fundamental thing is U.S. strategic interest in the region. And if one day the United States decided that Israel really wasn't in its interest, or this sort of unconditional support for Israel really wasn't, U.S., I think, would drop Israel under the bus in an instant. It's not. There's a lot of people in this administration and this elite that don't particularly like Jews anyway. They wouldn't have a lot of trouble throwing Israel under the bus. And Jews that are putting their fate in these hands, I think, are making a very big mistake, rather than siding, with the peoples of the Middle East and working things out, because I don't see any reason why they couldn't.